Hey guys, this is your Rob Droppy from Redbeard Customs. So what we're doing today and over the next week, probably 2 weeks, is changing out the pads on about 94 3080s, 3090s, 3070s, 3060 Ti's. Got a guy in San Antonio, Texas, that's got a 7.2 gigahash farm who was led astray and left holding his pecker. So we're going to help him out and change all the pads on his cards, because none of his rigs, he's got 12 rigs, and none of them, hardly any of them will mine consistently, stably. At least there's at least 3 or 4 cards on each rig that's got 3 or 4, yeah, 3 or 4 cards on each rig that are throttling down. He's losing hash rate. And since I'm going to be doing this, I've been meaning to take a video, not just about changing pads on a card, but these thermal pads that I've been using, discovered a while back. They're called Critical Pads, and you can get them on criticalpads.com or on Amazon now. But they're 20 watt per meter Kelvin. The factory thermal pads and the stuff that EK, Alpha Cool, Corsair, that they send with their water blocks, the blue ones, are only 3.5 watts per meter Kelvin. So I'm not really surprised that all these 30 series cards are thermal throttling on the memory in mining. These pads, just these pads alone, drop the memory tips from 110 down into the 70s, low 80s. And I just love them. And they're priced competitively too. So we're going to be tearing this card down and changing these pads. I'm going to show you guys a little secret too when I get to the memory portion. Take that back plate off, and then you want to remove the 4 screws on the front of the I/O. I don't know if that's the screw. Let me see. Let me get one of these other ones off and compare. It looks like it. Oh yeah, that's it. Golly, that's the fastest I've ever found a tiny screw in my life. I normally have to call my wife in here to find it because my eyesight's so bad. Alright, so we got the I/O plate off. Now, let's go for the cooler retaining bracket. I love these. These are so good. They put so much nice, consistent, even, safe pressure between the cooler and the PCB of the card. Alright. A lot of people are afraid of these cards because of these tiny little wires. But if you know what you're doing and you take your time, there's nothing to be afraid of. So this one right here, you just got to take that little metal section and slide it back, and then this piece actually comes up. Vertically. Well, this one's being stubborn. Boy, oh boy, this one is being stubborn. Slide that back and forth a couple times. Well, good grief, if every card was like this, yeah, I guess I might be afraid. I'm gonna have to get the razor blade. I think pop this one out. Get it right there in that crack. There we go. Good grief. There's one over here in the back. So when I come to this side, release that little bitty black-gray tensioner. And then that's easy, comes out easy enough. And then one over here as well. Tensioner up. And I just rock it side to side a little bit on each side. And then I just lift straight up and away. And it just pulls out when you pull the PCB away. Alright. Get some of this extra old thermal paste off of here. Toss that in the trash. That bit off of the cooler. And this is the same white thermal pads that NVIDIA's used for years. Get rid of those. Such a thin layer of thermal paste actually on the die, you can get it all off with just a thin paper towel. And wipe that slimy stuff off those milled faces right there. Then we got a little alcohol on here. When we put our new stuff on there, it makes really good contact. Get some of that junk off of that memory. I'm gonna have to figure something else out besides these cheap paper towels, because I always have to go back and get little bits and pieces off. Because it breaks apart. Alright, so here's the great thing I want to share with you guys. And there's other guys out there that have shared this. They didn't share where to get it though. I had to do some research to find out what it is. They just called it Magic Paste, but its actual name is TG-PP10-50G. And that -50G is 50 grams. They've got a -10G and a -1000G. But this here paste right here, white paste right here, or thermal putty, makes a world of a difference. You can use this on any thermal pad and it'll help. So what I do, I just get some on my finger. and I just rub it hard on those memory chips. They ain't gotta be perfect. Whatever you don't get with the memory with this stuff, the actual pad itself will touch and cover. But adding this stuff between your thermal pad and the face of the chip gets you in another 3 to 5 C lower. And my reasoning for it, that's why I even decided to try this, because it made sense to me, is that this makes better microscopic contact with the face of the memory chips than the actual memory pads themselves do. This stuff is expensive, and if left once open, doesn't have a hugely long shelf life. So I'm going to save as much of it as I can. All right, once you get on there, that's not long enough. Now we start adding the thermal pads. So I only changed out the pads on the memory. That's the only part that really gets super hot and overly hot while mining. There's no real need to change the pads on everything, as long as you don't tear them up while taking the card apart. And I don't do that because I know what I'm doing. 1.5 millimeter thermal pads going on. Alright. I have a leftover piece over here. Just a little bit too short. Don't want to forget these little individual pieces over here. They hide. I wonder if that will work. Oh boy, that is perfect. Look at there. It's a whole bunch of strips ready to go. Alright. A nice little pet. This is the fun part. Peeling that little protective layer off. All of these 3080 FEs were either in the low to mid hundreds, and several of them were in the were 110 plus throttling, and that's in a room with 78-degree Fahrenheit ambient air, and in Texas, that can't work unless you got a really small farm. See, if you got a really small farm, 1 or 2 rigs, you can mine inside your house. There's a little marker there, a little peg that lines up with a hole in the board, makes it real easy to reinstall. if you got like a really substantial farm, you know, like 1.5, 2, 3 plus gigahash, you can't do that in your house, and you can't, realistically cool the cards with air conditioning. So you got to figure stuff out. You got to get creative here in Texas. I put all my cards in the guest house or in the garage, and even with four giant, well, with four giant 20-inch King Air whole house window fans, two exhaust, two intaking in the summer when it was 9,500 degrees outside. If it's 100 degrees outside, at the coolest, at the absolute coolest, you could keep it inside the guest house was maybe 101, 102. Because we're getting 100-degree air from outside, getting pulled in, mixing with the 120, 130-degree air off the cards, and then immediately getting exhausted out the back. And it worked great, but I changed the pads on every single one of my cards. All these cards from the factory are throttling in ambient temperatures like that. And that's just what we have to work with here in Texas. And that's why we do this. That was the right tip already on it. Put this retaining bracket back on. I love these retaining brackets. They put such good, even, safe pressure on the die and memory. Wonderful. One more screw here. There we go. I'm going to go back to the IO shield, back on. Change tips. All four screws in the front, off and back on. Alright, that's on. Now, back plate almost done, guys. I used to consider these FE cards the hardest cards to do, but after I've done a few, they're really not that bad. There's other AIB models that are just nightmares at changing all the pads, like the old GTX model EVGA cards where you had the cooler and then like a sub plate, and you had to take this two screws on this and that through the cooler to loosen it off the sub plate to get the cooler off, and then you got all these screws in the back to get the sub plate off, and then you got pads between the sub plate and the PCB and the sub plate and the cooler. That's a nightmare card. Takes like 30 minutes to do that card. Wrong hole. Don't say it. Don't say it. There we go. Alright, put that in that corner. Put this down. Now these little guys. I respect the ingenuity, but I hate these stupid things. As you can tell, I don't have the smallest hands. And these things really suck to mess with. I haven't lost one yet. Knock on wood. I don't know how you can put them on wrong, but I managed to do that. Just like putting a USB drive in. The right way is the wrong way. Look at that. That's where it goes. There we go. There we go. All right. And that's a completed 3080 FE, ladies and gentlemen.